日前，拜登无预警宣布退选之后，命运之神就把贺锦丽从候补球员名单修改成民主党最佳救援投手。一时间，贺锦丽集万千宠爱，看涨的声势让川普感到不耐。
Well, Biden's gone. Harris is the candidate now. So at a minimum, we have reset the map to a traditional battleground state. But remember, after those last debates, it was Trump could win here, Trump could win here, and Trump could win here. Not only did the polls show that, and I'll bring them up, Anderson, but we talked about that after all of my travels into those states. So let's just look a little May and now. Trump ahead in Pennsylvania, you're exactly right. This is no clear leader statistically within the margin of error, but Trump had momentum. This Michigan poll, New York Times, Siena had Biden ahead slightly. I can tell you from my travels, Trump had momentum there as well. And Wisconsin tighter, but Trump with momentum. The question is, don't believe any one poll. Which way is the arrow pointing? Who has the momentum? Well, look at this in August now. Harris up a little bit within the margin of error, but in Pennsylvania, up a little bit more in Michigan, up a little bit more in Wisconsin. So what does that mean? That means if the election were tomorrow and the energy and momentum you see out there right now played out, you would get that. And even if Harris lost Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona, she could get to 270 electoral votes. So those three states, the blue wall, make all the difference in the Democratic calculation. If she is strong in these, it opens up the possibilities across the Sun Belt.
I saw Kamala Harris said that she's the underdog in this race. Is that the way you see it? I mean, are you guys still the front runners here?
Look, I think that we are going to have a very tight election.
But Trump seems to think that he's got a huge lead. I mean, you said this at the press conference. He suggested it could be a landslide looking at polls. Do you tell him that you need to kind of like temper expectations?
I think President Trump is extremely confident. Look, I'm extremely confident. I think we're going to win. I also think that we have to work as hard as possible for the remainder of the election to try to persuade Americans to vote for us. That's the name of the game. But yeah, look, do I think President Trump is actually as confident as he pretends to be in public? Yes, he actually is. But we still have to work very hard.
贺锦丽是来势汹汹的黑马吗？目前从各家民调，甚至是从赌盘趋势来看，贺锦丽的人气胜过川普是不争的事实。但是绝对碾压川普吗？这篇刊登在《金融时报》的评论，或许值得贺川双方阵营好好思考未来选战的打法，因为当中披露几个重点，都是贺锦丽无可回避的硬伤。
A report Wednesday put the annual inflation rate at 2.9% in July, the first time it's been under 3% since 2021.
In this report, the hands-down biggest increase came from housing. 90% of the increase in CPI came from shelter, which mostly includes rent. So that is one of the areas we have seen prices do continue to go up on a monthly basis.
This chart shows consumers' confidence in the economy during the Biden and Trump administrations. As of June 2024, confidence in the economy under President Biden averaged nearly 28 points lower compared to during former President Trump's term. It hit an all-time low back in June of 2022. According to the latest survey from Gallup, 53% of Americans believe the Republican Party will do a better job with the economy, compared to just 39% who favor the Democrats.
At this point, every survey that I know of tells me that Republicans are seen as having the advantage for the management of the economy.
Voters seem to think that President Trump was a better steward of the economy than President Biden, and I think that's going to be an important advantage for Republicans.
While the U.S. technically isn't in a recession, roughly 3 out of 5 Americans believe it is. In 2024, nearly 3/4 of Americans said strengthening the economy should be a top policy priority, while a third mentioned economic issues as the nation's most important problem.
Vice President Kamala Harris will give her first policy-focused speech on the economy Friday when she travels to Raleigh, North Carolina. The campaign says the remarks will focus on tackling inflation, lowering costs for the middle class, and a plan to take on corporate price gouging.
高涨的物价，棘手的通货膨胀，国民对经济的信心，对贺锦丽来说都如芒被再刺。尽管第一时间她挑选华资作为副手，赢得不少人的掌声。但是两个人在经济上都没有值得拿出来说嘴的时机。一旦选民对候选人的蜜月期结束，民主党端不出可以给选民带来希望的经济牛肉，将会是贺锦丽竞选路上可怕的噩梦。
The Financial Times has a poll out, which I'm sure you saw, with the headline, Kamala Harris is more trusted than Donald Trump on the U.S. economy. What do you make of that?
I make that's just euphoria that Biden is no longer the nominee. I mean, look, Are Democrats in a better place than they were with Biden? Yes, but with Biden, they weren't just going to lose, they were going to crater everything. What I read in that poll, Democrats are playing defense. So she has to play defense. Now, it's a different race for us. If this race, whoever this race is about, loses, if this race is about the economy, if it's about the border, if it's about crime, Kamala's in a very weak place. But if it's about personality, it gives her an advantage.
What do you make of her pivot or move over the weekend? And I know former President Trump's calling it a copycat move, but effectively to say, you know what, we're not going to tax tips as well. Sort of this idea, and we keep hearing it, but we haven't, I think, fully seen it realized just yet, that on some of her policies, economic and otherwise, that she may actually shift to the center. And how much harder does that make it for the president, if in fact, for the former president, that is, if in fact she does that?
I would have her say that, then I'd come right back and show exactly what she did. Not only did she vote for, she was the swing vote to hire all the new IRS agents to go after you on how you reported your tips. So she would become a flip-flopper on almost everything, which would be a bad position for her.
贺锦丽尴尬的处境并不是不能在政策上反复，而是她是寻求连任的现任副总统，在政策上几乎不会与现任总统有不同观点的贺锦丽必须以更谨慎的态度来面对接下来要公布的政策愿景。
We know our immigration system is broken, and we know what it takes to fix it.
Vice President Kamala Harris leaning into what Democrats know is a weakness for her campaign, border security.
New numbers also show migrants meant to be deported under a Biden-Harris administration program have instead been allowed to stay in the U.S. In fact, some 90% were allowed to stay in the U.S. The New York Post found that more than 22,000 of the 24,000 migrants in the Family Expedited Removal Program were allowed to stay. The data also showed nearly 4,000 migrants have secretly escaped from the program without a trace.
Vice President Kamala Harris's new border ad is emphasizing her background as a prosecutor in a border state.
She took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border.
The ad, an apparent effort to address GOP criticism on the border.
BBC 在近期一篇专栏里点出贺锦丽选举路上的另一个危机。Americans have consistently said in polls this year that immigration is a top problem facing their country, and it will weigh many their minds when they cast ballots for the next US president in November. 即便白宫目前正大力为贺锦丽洗刷 "failed border czar" 这个错误的称号，但是最终贺锦丽要面对的是如何摆脱又不能太摆脱拜登路线。一旦赞成拜登政策，就等同是拜登2号出来竞选，对选票的注意不大。否定拜登政策可能会引起党内反弹的风险。切割与拜登执政的共业，美国选民会不会含泪投票，都是贺锦丽竞选团队要好好思考的问题。
Harris has just declared that tackling inflation will be a day one priority for her. It's going to be day one. But day one really for Kamala was 3.5 years ago. Where has she been? And why hasn't she done it? Why hasn't she done it? I hear her complaining all the time. She was the border czar, but she didn't do anything. It's the worst border czar in history. There's never been a border czar so bad. She's been unbelievable in terms of her badness to some of our allies, some of our great allies. You know who I'm talking about. Here is the record of economic calamity that Kamala is desperate for voters to ignore. She cast the tie-breaking votes that caused record inflation. She cast the votes. She's trying to blame Biden, as you know. So it was Biden, but I'm going to do a better job. But it was her. And if she wants to do a better job, she's still got 5 months left, right?